Thank you for joining me. I hope many aspects of your life are progressing. My name is Jason Elder, and this is Analyst Talk with Jason Elder, our special edition. Our limited series continues with Sean Bair's guide to hiring a law enforcement analyst. This is step 2 in the process, which is the application. In our previous episode, we went over the search being as a manager deciding whether you want to replace a position or deciding whether a new position needs to be created. And for the job seeker, just different aspects of deciding to do the job search. We've went over a couple of different aspects of the search meaning starting the job search at the plan and getting the groundwork of landing that next law enforcement analyst position. Now we want to go to the application. So I welcome back Sean. I appreciate your time here again. First episode was great, and now we're back for more. So how you doing?
Always happy to help. I'm glad to be here and doing good. Thanks.
I want to start with the manager has decided that he or she is either creating a new position or filling an existing position. They've made all the proper changes that they want, got it all set up for how they want the position to look. And now it's time for the job announcement. And we certainly talked a little bit about it in the first episode about some of the restrictions managers might have from HR or the agency that they work for. Given all of that there are going to be restrictions. What are the keys for managers in the job announcement to make sure that they get the best candidates?
Yeah, I think you hit a lot of it, but understanding what the department wants the analyst to do, just a real good understanding of what their expectations are. What do they want that law enforcement analyst to do? So if it is going to be more of a crime analysis position, do they want them to be able to do, are their needs administrative crime analysis? Are they wanting to do more strategic, long-term increases, decreases in crime, maybe some problem-oriented policing stuff? Are they wanting them to be a tactical analyst where they're finding trends and patterns? Or are they wanting them to be more of an intelligence analyst and deal with gangs and narcs and the like? So it really is incumbent upon that hiring manager or HR or the combination of the two to really understand what it is they're trying to accomplish. Like we talked about in the first episode, it's not only the immediate needs, but it's also what are our 3, 5, even 10-year goals for this position? What do we want it to look like a year from now, 3 years from now, 5 years from now? And so those should help guide what that job description is going to be like and who you're going to go after to try and hire. Of course, the best candidate, after you've decided all that, comes down to oftentimes salary. So are your salary offerings in line with what that region is offering? Or are you, like some departments trying to do, be 5 to even 10% higher than the neighboring agencies? Because you do want to attract the cream of the crop and you want it to be a coveted position. What are the benefits for that law enforcement analyst? What do they have? Good health care, and what are the days off? And again, even sort of the immeasurable, like what sort of autonomy do they have? Do they get to take home a laptop? Those sorts of things are very helpful. I actually liked as a benefit early on that I could work a 4-10 schedule. Because again, we had discussed about or talked about how I was, using that day off to actually help build Bair software back in the day. So that might be a benefit to somebody that you might not think about, but it could be something that is the deciding factor between an applicant choosing A or choosing B to apply for. We talked also about in the first episode, the position in the department. I, as an applicant, want to know that I might be working in patrol, or maybe they're going to have me positioned in investigations or intelligence, or maybe I'll be up on the upper floors where I'll be with administration. That's a key factor to consider with not only the hiring managers where you're going to place that person, but remember the applicants also considering that too.
So do you have a particular set of words or maybe a particular parts that you want to make sure that are in your job announcements?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Well, of course, HR has to approve it.
Sure.
But if I were to Yeah, I like that question, Jason. And here's how it applies in business too, because I've found that when I am completely open and honest and also very unique in my job descriptions, that I get unique applicants. And that's kind of what I want. I want
Mhm.
that unique individual. So let me give you an example. The very best programmer that I ever hired was for Bair Analytics, and his name is John Fivekiller. Awesome.
Yes, that's a great name.
And I hired him right out of college. And we were just getting going at Bair Analytics. I think he was my first hire, in fact, because I was still doing all the programming at that point. But what I did was I put an ad on Craigslist. I used some terms like kick butt ninja coder who has Yoda-like skills and things like that I knew would apply, that would sort of pique the interest of coders who were out there writing their little bots that scan all the Craigslist and LinkedIn and everything else looking for job announcements. And that mine would stand out because of those things. And I knew if I were in their shoes, the applicant shoes, I would look at that and be like, this isn't the run of the mill software company. I may want to interview for this because this might be a fun time. They might be doing some cool things there. And so that's how I found my best developer, because he in fact commented that I loved the job announcement. I thought this has to be a cool position. And so the same holds true with the words you would use in the job description, having, of course, appeased HR with all the words that you need to use, but, using words that would attract the type of person that you're after. Using words like maybe autonomy, because as applicants are reading a job description, if they know they can have autonomy and aren't going to be micromanaged in an agency, I think from my experience, an awful lot of the people that I've hired like autonomy and like to be able to do what they know is right and do the job the way they know how to perform it. I would even go so far as to describe who you're going to report to, not the individual, but the position. So you will report to the chief over blah, blah, blah. That will give that applicant an understanding of, again, going back to the previous podcast, what my role is going to be. So if I know I'm going to be reporting to a patrol sergeant, I know what I'm going to be doing for that department, no doubt. If I know I'm going to be reporting to the robbery detective, well, there you go right there. So you're going to want to choose those words wisely, and they do matter. And so you don't want to be generic and just have a very generic copied and pasted it from a neighboring agency. You're going to want to put those things in there that matter to, one, what your agency is trying to accomplish, and then two, to be able to entice the most qualified applicants.
Yeah, there's an art to it. It can be very difficult. And it kind of gets into the next question we want to talk about, which is getting the right number of applicants. I recently talked to a buddy of mine who's hiring for the state of Florida. He did one job announcement and got 150 applications for one position. Then couldn't get through them all. So then he had to redo it. His bosses told him to redo it. So he put more stringent wording into the announcement. And then he got 6 applicants. He decided that all 6 of them just knew what keywords to use to get through the firewall, so to speak, of HR, and none of them were who he was looking for or qualified for the position. In a matter of a couple of months, he was on both sides of the scale. What advice would you have for managers of trying to get that right number of applicants?
I don't mind those large numbers in applicants. It shows that we have a lot to choose from as a hiring manager. So those don't bother me. What bothers me is the low numbers, because then I start questioning as a hiring manager, whether it's in business or in government, I start questioning, okay, are our minimum qualifications too stringent? Are we scaring people away? Is the job description, the functions and things we're going to do scaring people away? Is our salary not appropriate for this area and for the types of things that we're asking this person to do? Is where they're going to be in the department scaring people away? A low number of applicants is more of a self-reflection, I think, from a manager at that point, to say, whoa, what's happening here? What are we doing wrong to not get a bunch of people applying for this job? Because if you wrote the job right, that law enforcement analysts wanted You're going to just have the run of the department. It's going to be amazing. Your salary is going to be $400K a year. You're going to get a department car. We'll let you ride around in patrol cars and run the sirens. You would have 300,000 applicants for that position, right? And you would be able to pick the one you wanted. So what is wrong with only getting 6 applicants? There's something up with what you've put in the job description there. Maybe the testing scaring people off. I think it's best to have 300 to choose from versus 6 to choose from.
Is there anything else that might be overlooked and from the manager's perspective in terms of the job announcement?
Yeah, I think so many job announcements just go out local or in the state. I don't think they appreciate how many people are willing to relocate. If you make a job announcement, I would make a national search. I would put it on LinkedIn if I were a hiring manager. I would also specifically reach out to analysts that you've sort of researched or found or leaders in the industry. There's no reason why you couldn't write a Susan Hammond if you thought she was an amazing analyst and heard a lot about her and read even some of her books as you're trying to prepare for hiring your first analyst. Why would you not reach out to her and at least try and poach her and say, hey, look, what would it take to get you to work for us? Or at minimum, get her to help you hire the right analyst. International, so if you post to something like an IACA or ILEA or even IACP, you got to be careful because you would need to be going back to the first question, which is what do we need to put in our job description? You're going to want to be specific about who can actually apply. Because if you're not going to allow for international applicants, which a lot of U.S. government positions don't allow, unless there's urgent need, you're going to want to say that. So you're not wasting anybody's time. So you're saying, no, don't even waste that analyst who's amazing at Vancouver PD up in British Columbia who applies. You can't hire him in the first place because those are the rules of your department. And providing on that application, I would say a number or numbers that the applicant or interested applicant can call with questions, getting back to our topics about having them call HR. I would make it clear as they're going to require a testing process. Once again, just making sure that you've done the salary survey and you know that your salary is at least on par with everybody else around you, if not above, because you want your analyst to be the best in the region.
No, I like the point about using some of the associations. I mean, I know your point is valid in terms of if the international candidates would qualify or could qualify, but I don't see a lot of announcements through a lot of the associations. So it tells me that hiring managers aren't reaching out that much to the associations where there's obviously a lot of analysts reading those announcements. And in terms of the job seeker, we touched on this a little bit in the previous episode, whether the job seeker qualifies for the position after reading the job announcement. But is there anything else that you would recommend that the job seeker get out of the job announcement?
Maybe software. I'm a software guy. So if I'm applying to an agency and it's not so stated in the job description that you will be using ArcGIS version, blah, 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 or a TAC version this, or Microsoft products, I would want to know that. So if it weren't in the job description, I would want to know as a job seeker, what is their software platforms there? I want to know about that. And remember, it's not just the applications I use, it's the applications I'm going to hit too. So it's what RMS do they have? What CAD system do they have? Is the data readily available, or am I going to have to write extractions from the RMS and be able to get the data that way? These are all good things to know before you're applying for a position.
We're going to move on to cover letter. I think for managers, certain steps that just seem to always apply. And you talked about it, I think, a little bit in the last episode. I always hear people do this. Why do you do a certain things? Well, because we always done it that way. Right. And I think, you get the job announcement and then, okay, now you have to have the cover letter and resume portion of the process. But the cover letter maybe lost its luster over the years, over the decades. And I don't know if it's because everything's electronic now and you go through emails. I know for me personally, the cover letter is my least favorite task of going through the job seeking process, just because it don't really have a purpose for it. I'm kind of just reiterating what's on my resume anyway, and it just doesn't seem to mesh But we'll first start with the manager, and then we'll go to the job seeker in terms of the cover letter. But from the manager's perspective, is the cover letter necessary now?
Freaking A. I don't want to I don't want to be wishy-washy about it, obviously, here, by saying freaking A. Yes, it absolutely is. But what I would do as a hiring manager is not require it in the application process. I've even seen some agencies go so far as to explicitly state, do not include a cover letter. Big mistake. That's your opportunity as a hiring manager to, separate the good from the bad, the people who get it, who don't. And a cover letter, I'm sorry to say you don't like them. Too bad, so sad. It is an unbelievable tool the applicant has to distinguish themselves from all the other yabos that are applying for the job. So everybody else, if the hiring manager doesn't say, and we want you to write a cover letter, nobody's going to do it. They're going to complete their CV or resume. They're going to complete the application and they're going to send it in. And it's going to look like everybody else's. But the one applicant who goes a step further and having done the research on the agency, knowing what the mission is, the goals is, knowing all about that job announcement and what they're looking for, can craft an appropriate cover letter that encompasses some of that and maybe even addresses maybe a shortfall or two. So like I said, I would always apply for a position that I didn't think I might be completely qualified for. Well, I would address that in my cover letter. Maybe I didn't have a master's degree, but they were preferred, or not requiring, but they prefer that. I might say, well, I have, these qualifications and these certificates and these other things that help me out. So the cover letter is your opportunity to now personalize your application to that department, because otherwise your CV, your resume, and your application is like everybody else's. There's no distinguishment between them. The cover letter lets you now begin to specifically speak to that agency. So I really like the cover letter. But going back to what I originally said, I wouldn't, as a hiring manager, require it, because now you're just, again, making everybody do it. And you really wanted to identify those that do it without being told to do it. Look for that unique applicant that takes the time to write it. And the last thing I would say is, don't tell them not to write a cover letter. If you just say, submit your resume and anything else you think is pertinent to our decision-making in this application process, now you're going to see who's going to take the extra step there and go the extra mile. And so now you may get even portfolios being presented. You get cover letters. You'll get samples of product they may have done. You're going to want all that.
And you've hit on it a little bit for the job seeker as well, what to put in there. I mean, you're making the case for you to be selected for the position, or at least at this point to go on to the next step, which may be an interview or whatever the next step is in the process.
There are standards that are out there for cover letters. I'll tell you, the very first thing you probably should do is thank them for allowing you the opportunity to apply to the X job. So you start it off that way. And then I would, if I were writing this cover letter, I would maybe then go into things about that department. I might in some way address their mission statement, their purpose, things that they're trying to accomplish. And then finally, I would support that by saying how I would help them achieve those goals. Once again, close it with thanking them. I hope they look favorably upon my submission. Sincerely, Sean Bair, Yoda of Crime Analyst. I don't know, something.
Okay, good. All right, let's move on to the resume and CV. We had talked about this before the show. Is just prepping for this episode, is resume, CV. I talked to some people in terms of the resume, they're like, it has to be one page. And then other people are like, no, it's okay to have multiple pages. And it then gets more into a CV. And I guess, where do you stand on that?
One page is, you had to have probably just graduated college to only fill one page. So there's nothing wrong with a 2-page. 3-page starts getting a little much. You better have some accomplishments with a 3-page. I wouldn't even call it a resume at that point. Now it becomes more of a CV. You
Mm-hmm.
don't want to be fluffy in your resumes. Volunteer activities are good. Those can supplement sort of I won't call it a weak resume, but maybe an early resume in your professional career. I have a CV, and here's some advice I would give on the resume or the CV. Anytime there is a change, you took a class, you got a certificate, you wrote an article, you attended a webinar, whatever it is, update the CV. You might not believe, but I update my CV still, and I'm not looking for a job. I own a company, but I update my CV literally probably once a month with something. I recently was hired to go teach strategy and economics in the business school at Brigham Young University. And so, boom, the moment I got that job offer, I added that to my CV. It hasn't even happened yet. It's in the fall, but it says on my CV, teaching strategy and economics, BYU, fall 2020, because it matters. And also because I'm going to forget it. If I don't write it down, I'll forget these accomplishments that I have, that I wrote this article or that I volunteered over at this organization. I'll forget those things. So I write them down. It's almost like an ongoing history of my accomplishments and my achievements. So that's the one piece of advice I would give your listeners and those job seekers out there, is that is a living, breathing document. It's always being updated. I'll also say this: it has to be tailored to who you're submitting it to. So you don't just take your one resume or your one CV and wherever you're applying, that's the one CV or resume you use. So when I applied to BYU to become a professor there, I moved some things around, things that mattered more than others to those people who were going to be reading the CV. Articles, publication, books, things of that nature, my history teaching at other universities, adjunct. Those things became a little more important than the fact that I was a crime analyst at a police department back in the day. You can reorganize your CV to match the hirer so that they have the best portrayal of you. Not many people suggest this, or I should say it's sort of 50-50. I like to have an objective at the top of my CV. So I usually will rewrite my objective to somewhat match, not be so overt that it's sort of gross, but somewhat match what the needs are of who I'm applying to. For example, when I applied to BYU, I went and looked at what their goals are, what their mission statement is, so on and so forth. And I wanted to know the type of professor they want teaching there. My objective was reworded to give a nod to what their objectives are. Same thing with the police department. So I might know that the police department's goal is to further community policing. Well, my objective at the top might say something like leverage my knowledge, skills, experience, and acumen as a law enforcement analyst to further community policing and public safety, something like that. And so they'll read that. It's the very first thing they read, like, oh, okay, this guy wants to do basically what we're wanting to do. This matches up, and they continue reading. So the page count, to get back to your earlier question, there's standards to margins and font styles and types. I wouldn't be doing, special papers or funky imagery and stuff like that. You just need to stick with the professional resume, the professional CV. You need to know your audience. If I were applying to become an artist at a gallery, my resume might look pretty, right? But you're applying to a police organization or a sheriff's department. You're going to want to be pretty, just a fax man, by the book, use the standard fonts, the colors and everything else like that. But yeah, don't worry about the page count. Don't fluff it because they see right through that. But also don't leave anything out. I like to see volunteer experience on an application. I like to see it an awful lot because I want to know that you have a life outside of work. And I want to know what types of things you're doing outside of work, what kind of clubs you belong to, where do you volunteer, and how do you donate your time? I want to see that because those are traits that the department want to have in an applicant to hire. So I might want to know that. Not many people put this, and it's unfortunate, and it's changed a little bit. But I used to really appreciate when a male applicant put that they were an Eagle Scout, because I happen to know, having volunteered for that organization, how much effort, time, dedication goes into attaining the level of Eagle Scout. So those types of things are important on your resume.
I guess you had mentioned it, kind of stick to the facts. But there's an art to this in terms of the job seeker, because while you want to stick to the facts, you also want to stand out. And we were talking about this in the prep meeting. My buddy was advising my nephew who's looking in the IT field and put something like you're a help desk ass kicker or something to that effect to just
Yeah.
make him stick out. He's fresh out of college. He doesn't have a lot of meat on the bones per se in terms of a resume. So he has to stick out. So I
Yeah.
guess talk a little bit about that, especially with those that don't have a lot on the resume, but are trying to stick out at the same time, but not go too far, if you know what I mean.
I do. And I'll just sort of restate what I said, because when I said just the facts, ma'am, I meant it only for law enforcement analyst types. Because again, your resume, your CV is a document that is going to be read by somebody in that agency. You need to be addressing it so that it is well received by those who are going to be reading it. I told you how I hired John Fivekiller, and I used words like ninja coder, Yoda, so on and so forth. And they liked that from a hiring manager's perspective. And then when they responded in kind, I appreciated that. So we get each other, and I'm going to hire that kind of person. In law enforcement, what I meant by just the facts, ma'am, is the hiring people over law enforcement don't want to see the word ass-kicking ninja crime analyst. They don't want to see that. So you need to know your audience. If you're a law enforcement analyst wannabe or are one, you're going to want to make it very professional. Maybe that's a better term than sterile and just the facts, but you're going to want to make it very professional in nature. Now, to get to your second part of your question, which was, what can you do if you really don't have accomplishments? You don't want to embellish them because they can see right through that. You can go get them. So maybe you're not ready, truthfully. If you think you're going to apply to become a law enforcement analyst in a local agency, and it's a decent salary, and they're going to be doing different types of analysis, and you've not been one, you've not volunteered in an agency, you've not taken any classes, you're not part of the local association, and really your job at Neaters is really all you got to offer, but in a justice studies degree from Arizona State University, like I did, you're not going to get there. They're going to have 300 applicants, majority of which are going to have experience and have volunteer work and done this, that, and the other. So what do? So how do you position yourself if you're in college, or if maybe you're recently graduated and you find yourself, the way Sean just described it, I'm in deep trouble here. There's no reason that you can't go download the software that agencies use. The primary software is mapping software. Go get MapInfo or ArcGIS. Chances are it's ArcGIS. They'll allow trial versions. You can learn it in 30 days, good enough to be able to take a test. I can promise you that. You can volunteer to an agency. They take volunteers all the time. You can ask to volunteer to the analyst units. You can do a lot of ride-alongs to really get a sense of what they're doing. You can seek out mentors. I happen to know that the IACA, because I just said I would do it, has a mentorship program. So become a mentee and get with a mentor who would love nothing more than be able to move that slippery rock out of your path that they might have tripped on back in the day. That's why I'm doing it. I think I have a lot to offer. Trials and tribulations that I had experienced, I don't want somebody else to have to go through that. So I can offer up some suggestions. There's an awful lot people can do within a month's time, Jason, that they'll have a lot of material to put on a resume. Because if all they've done is graduate college, but now they've just incorporated everything I just said, they've downloaded software that maybe that agency's using, they've volunteered, they've done different things, all that now goes on the resume. Here are the software I'm proficient in. Maybe you don't have articles or publications yet. Maybe you don't have a master's degree, this, that, and the other, or experience, but now you can start listing software you're proficient in. And so that could be a section that begins to give them an insight that although you don't have a lot of practical experience like I had back in the day, I didn't have practical experience, but I was really good at software. So I could, and I did in my resume, express that.
So I want to move on to a product that is often overlooked. Talked about cover letter, we talked about resume and CV. Definitely in terms of the law enforcement analyst hiring process, the portfolio is often overlooked. I think managers don't ask for them and job seekers don't produce them. Talking with you, Sean, you highly recommend the portfolio. So let's talk about that.
Yes, I do highly recommend the portfolio. I'm glad you're bringing this up, Jason. What is a portfolio, right? Let me try and define it first. If I were a architect and I wanted to go work for a new architectural firm, I would go to the interview with probably a very large binder looking thing. It's like 2 or 3 feet in width. And I would open that up and I would show them the architectural drawings that I had done. Because if they're hiring somebody to draw architectural plans, they're going to want to see that I can draw architectural plans, not just tell them I can, right? They're going to want to see what my form is, my style is, sort of how complex they've been. How is that any different than applying for a law enforcement analyst position? So when you go into an interview, you're going to want to be able to have that. And we'll talk about that in future sort of sections and questions. But the manager, I wouldn't, as a hiring manager, mandate that they bring samples of their work product in, which is what a portfolio is. Let the prepared analyst separate themselves from the less prepared analyst. Somebody who brings in samples of their work product is somebody that you should score higher than somebody who just comes in and says, I'm an expert at ArcGIS and I know how to do mapping. No, show me that you can do mapping. That's the type of applicant you want. But don't let them know that that's one of your criteria for sort of during the evaluation. So as a hiring manager, the types of things that I might want to see in a portfolio are, one, did they even take the time and effort to build one and then to bring it in? And then what does it look like? I have to say, it's unfortunate that in a couple of the hiring processes that I've been a part of for other agencies, a few analysts have brought in portfolios, and good for them. But it actually worked against them because they were so bad that it was, oof, if this is the level that you can do, we just know we might have to go a little bit further with some training and stuff. So
that's too bad.
Yeah. So, know what you're looking at too as a hiring manager. If you are presented with a portfolio, because again, you're not going to expect it or tell them you're expecting it, but if you're presented with one, you need to know how to evaluate it. Because if you're a hiring manager for a new position, and once again, I would expect that hiring manager really not to know a lot about the position, truthfully. Once again, seek out the help from neighboring analysts and pass it around and say, hey, look, what do you think of this? Does this show potential, or does this demonstrate that they are highly skilled, somewhat skilled, not skilled at all in mapping and in analytics and statistics, so on and so forth? So that's what the manager's perspective should be.
No, I think that's good. I think along those lines too, and we'll talk about this part of the interview episode, is you have your portfolio, but you also allow demonstration. If one of the tasks is to present findings, then you need to have, as part of the interview process, a presentation given by the applicants. And part of this section here with the application, we're getting just a little bit, some things to think about down the road and start planning for and prepare. So as a manager, start thinking about ways. You got your job announcement together. You're starting to collect resumes and CVs and cover letters. Well, you mentioned portfolio. It's a big thing. We'll go into some of the do's and don'ts in the interview episode. And same thing with the presentation. We'll get into that as well, the do's and don'ts and what to expect from a manager and a job seeker. So then just one final question on portfolios. How do you create a portfolio when you do not have any experience?
Yeah, I love that question. So that would go back to your earlier question about how do you really beef up a resume when you've got no, resume fodder. You don't really have much. Maybe I graduated, but that's about it. Well, this is the one opportunity to build up yourself with that portfolio. So here is where, as I described, you could download the software that agencies use, and you can begin to learn it and then begin to create products from it. And now you've just created products for your portfolio. Again, if you're a quick study and a fast learner, and you can download, let's just say, for example, ArcGIS, because again, there's a 30-day, I think at least a 30-day trial on it. I could download it, I could learn it, and then I can begin to make product from it. And if I was really ambitious, I could probably create some pretty cool products from it. Easily a PIM map, but even getting further to maybe I do some hotspot analysis or different things like that, a core pleth map, those would go into my portfolio. It doesn't have to be from an agency. It just has to show a demonstration or an understanding of, this is a core pleth map. I created it. This is the type of product that I could create for your agency. And so your portfolio could be made up of made up stuff. It doesn't have to be, oh, I did this when I was a law enforcement analyst at XYZ agency. The purpose of the portfolio is to demonstrate competency and also demonstrate that you've got sort of an eye for things too. I'll just tell a quick story here. Esri, obviously everybody knows about them, particularly in your listener pool. They have their map gallery. It's awesome. They also have people who present their maps. I got to see a presentation of a map once, which analytically, the product was stellar. It was unbelievable. Aesthetically, it was seriously problematic because what had happened was, I don't know why this student chose to do this, but they were representing the colors wrong. And so as everybody's looking at their analysis, which even with the choice of the wrong colors was interesting analysis, the way that the map was displayed, intuitively, everybody who was in the audience was thinking one thing when it was actually the exact opposite. We were all thinking, wow, look at how that one hotspot's over there, but down here, not so much. And when somebody, in fact, commented on that, made an observation of it and commented it to the presenter said, no. The blue is the hot spot. That's where all the bad stuff was happening. The red's where the good stuff is. Everybody looked at each other like, you got to be kidding me here, kid. And so you kind of need to, it could go wrong for you too. So that gets back to what I was saying in terms of you can use this as an opportunity to create product for your portfolio, but just be aware that you probably want to have somebody review it to make sure you're not presenting yourself in a manner that you don't want.
Sure. And I think that's where the associations can come in, because they're going to all have standards, and there's some standards out there for color on a map, on a link chart, on various products, the do's and don'ts of creating a
hotspot map or a core pleth map.
What's the BOLO? Creating or other type products. And just as you were talking there, I got to thinking about another maybe avenue that somebody can take if they don't have much experience, and that is talking to local homeowners associations. Homeowners associations have regular meetings, especially if one that's having some kind of crime problem. You might be able to situate yourself with getting access to data and being able to present to them what their problem is, and being able to see it on a map and be able to point out different characteristics. And that goes back to what you were saying, that you do want to make sure there's certain things that in that situation, you have to understand your audience. So chloropleth map might not be the best product in that case because it might go over their heads, but at the same time, and same with color, you don't want to make sure that their color is obvious and that they're going to be able to read it. So you want to make sure you understand your audience, but that is a volunteer opportunity to where you're actually working with data, you're presenting, you're answering questions about data, you're studying data, and maybe even get into a little bit of prediction analysis. So there's plenty of skills there that you can develop by volunteering in that situation.
Absolutely. I like the homeowners association example. That's great.
Yeah.
There's so much an applicant to do, having not even been a law enforcement analyst, that can demonstrate that they understand what the role is.
And the last segment is the application process. So what are some standard questions that you like to see in an application?
Well, the department's going to have their own standard questions
Sure.
that they usually ask, but I would definitely say for a law enforcement analyst, having them as part of the questions define the types of analysis. I wouldn't even tell them what we think the types of analysis are. Let's see what they say the types of analysis are. There's no necessarily right or wrong answer because it's an ology and it's on a text. I like to say it's on a psychology, sociology. We're an ology. We're not mathematics, analytics, statistics. So it's a little more amorphous in terms of what the right answer is in our profession. So as it relates to what are the types of analysis, they could say administrative, they could say strategic, could say tactical. Some might add in operational, which is when we started adding in toward the end of my career. You could add in intelligence, and there might even be others. Explaining various policing strategies or theories. So explain to us broken windows, or explain to us problem-oriented policing or community policing. Explain to us, these various different theories and strategies that police use. See, sort of test them on their knowledge of the profession. I would have them describe statistical techniques and when they might apply those statistical techniques. So tell us what chi-square is, and when would you apply chi-square? When would you apply a regression? What's a p-value? Maybe things like that. I might ask them to do that. Some of those are tough, and you know what? They don't always have to be 100% right. I would probably also include, and not a lot of agencies do this because they're government, but you'll see this a lot in business, I would have problem-solving questions. So, Microsoft and other tech companies or Google are notorious for doing this, where you're presented with some bizarre question that really tests your limit in terms of thinking outside the box. How many golf balls are there in a school bus? How much would you charge to clean all the windows in New York City? There's no right answer. We're just trying to see how you think through a question and what are the different sort of ways you come at it. So I would probably have a problem-solving question in there. So it may be for law enforcement. If our agency wanted to hire more officers, how would you go about providing the analysis for that? What sorts of things would you do? What data do you need? No right or wrong answer necessarily. Well, yeah, there are wrong answers. Them saying, well, I don't know, I would just add 50 officers. That would be a wrong answer. But, you would be able to weed those people out pretty quick.
I guess more successful, less successful.
Yes, there you go.
Answers.
Right. Opportunities for growth.
Yeah. So I think it's interesting, the problem-solving questions, and I really like them because I think it's what you've talked about. It's another opportunity to have somebody stick out. Yes. And it's another opportunity for the manager to see, okay, this person's a little bit different. This is more in line with my expectations. I think the problem is it's getting into the qualitative aspect of asking questions over the quantitative, right? Especially when government, and maybe they're getting out of this a little bit more, but it seems like, geez, they're just going to ask the standard question. You give maybe a multiple choice answer and ask the questions, and that's it. There is right or wrong answers, and it's very bland, and it doesn't allow for people to necessarily be unique or show unique experiences. Like I mentioned before, where they're just trying to meet a threshold in order to move on. So for the managers out there, if you can, ask open-ended questions on the application. I guess for the job seeker, understand that there is a purpose for all the questions that are on application. Everything that they're asking has its purpose. I think basically maybe for newer analysts, people trying to be analysts, maybe not fully being able to interpret and understand the intended answer. We talked about successful, less successful answers. If there is a question on an application where you're not really sure what they're after, that's another opportunity to reach out to HR or to reach out to the analyst that had this position before. We had talked about reaching out to either previous analyst of that same job or the analyst that is leaving, and they might be able to get some insight as to what really is trying to be asked there.
Yeah. Applications are not meant to be necessarily just sort of answered or filled out by the applicant. You can get your mom and dad to help. You can get your buddy analyst to help. You can, your whole purpose is to make it to the oral board, to make it to the interview. So answer the question. You might not have understood it before you were asked it, but I hope you understand it after you've answered it.
I guess in terms of the application, just to wrap up that segment, is there anything else you want to add from either the manager's perspective or job seeker's perspective in terms of the application?
I would probably restate the desire to get as many applicants as you can, because that shows a desire to work for that agency. If you don't have a lot of applicants, then you need to self-reflect and sort of figure out, what are you doing wrong? Is it the job market right now? Is it because our salary isn't high enough? Is it because we're too stuffy and sterile in our announcement? So I would say that the department should be blessed to have so many applicants. That's what they want. Yes, it's more work, but you're going to get the right person.
Well, I hope the audience has enjoyed this episode on the application. Our next episode, our next step, if you will, in the guide is the interview. So look for that. Thank you again for joining us. I hope that this is insightful and you are getting something out of this, whether you're a manager or soon to be manager, or if you're a job seeker. So Sean, thank you again for joining me and giving your insight, and we'll talk to you next time.
Very good.
Thank you for joining us today on Analyst Talk with Jason Elder. We hope you not only enjoyed the show, but also learned something new. For more information on our guests and information relating to today's topic, please visit our website at leapodcast.com. Special thanks to The Rough and Tumble for our theme song. For more of their music, you can visit their website at theroughandtumble.com. Also thanks to Kyle McMullen for our show logo. For more of his design, please visit his website at moderntype.com. The show is hosted, recorded, and edited by Jason Elder and written by me, Mindy. You can contact us both via the LEA Podcast website. Please join us again next time as we interview another expert in this great field.